You know, we live in an era where we can text someone on the other side of the planet in half a second, right? Or fly across oceans in a matter of hours. It really feels like the whole world is right there at our fingertips. But what's truly fascinating is that even in our hyper-connected modern age, geography absolutely still has the final say. There are literally places where nature acts as this massive fortress, limiting human connection and preserving ways of life that honestly seem like they belong to another century entirely. Welcome to today's Explainer. I'm thrilled to dive into this with you. Imagine this for a second. What if your entire world consisted of just a few hundred people? What if the nearest hospital wasn't a quick drive away, but actually required a days-long journey over treacherous oceans or ice? What if the internet barely existed for you, and isolation wasn't just some temporary retreat, like a lockdown, but just a permanent way of life? Well, today we're going to explore communities that live exactly like this, right on the absolute edge of human civilization. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the reality of isolation, then travel to the frozen frontier, journey across vast oceans, examine voluntary isolation, and finally, look at the future of remote life. Section 1. The reality of isolation. How geography dictates human connection. Now, it's totally crucial to understand that isolation isn't just one thing. It's not always just being stuck on an island. Take a look at the sheer variety of environments we humans have adapted to. You've got La Rinconada in the Peruvian Andes. We're talking 5,000 meters above sea level, literally higher than the clouds, where oxygen is super scarce and temperatures just plummet. Then you have Tristan da Cunha, completely surrounded by thousands of miles of open ocean. And finally, Tormik in Greenland, locked away by this unyielding Arctic ice. It's wild, right? We're incredibly resilient, and we've managed to build homes in the mountains, the oceans, and the ice. Section 2. Surviving the Frozen Frontier. Meet East Greenland. Let's move to our first deep dive and see how this builds our understanding. We're zooming in on a settlement of about 350 hardy souls perched right on the edge of the world's largest fjord system. And I love this quote from a visitor who called it an Arctic brigadoon. It's almost mythical. Just contrast our daily reality with theirs for a second. While we're casually running to the grocery store, they are dealing with polar bears wandering into town as the sea ice diminishes. They literally have armed lookouts and highly trained sled dogs stationed at the perimeter. For sure, survival here isn't just a hobby, it's a daily requirement. And that survival, it's deeply rooted in tradition. For example, local craftspeople make these tupaloks, traditional Inuit spirit figurines carved from bone or tusk. But here's the absolute key thing you need to take away. Ancestral practices here, from this carving to subsistence hunting for seal and narwhal, they're not some staged performance for the handful of tourists who make it out there. No way. These are vital survival tools that tightly link the community to the incredibly harsh environment around them. And that environment is completely 100% dictated by the seasons. The summer is super short, radiant with the midnight sun, and the sea ice retreats just enough for supply ships to maybe get through. But then winter sets in, and that brings deep silence, freezing temperatures, and a total reliance on helicopters and dog sleds. Their entire rhythm of life shifts based purely on whether the water around them is liquid or solid. It's like flipping a switch. Section 3. Thriving Across Vast Oceans. Tristan da Cunha. Let's leave the frozen Arctic behind and head way far south to a rugged volcanic island in the South Atlantic. 1,500. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the sheer number of miles separating Tristan's 221 residents from their absolute nearest inhabited neighbor. There is no airport. None. Getting there requires a week-long journey by sea from South Africa. And honestly, that's only if the weather permits. Because they are so incredibly isolated and their entire labor pool is just a couple of hundred people, they rely on a really unique system called the firm. Founded way back in 1817 by an original settler, Corporal William Glass, this is essentially a shared labor model. If someone is sick or off-island, neighbors step right in. Whether they're shearing sheep, repairing roofs, or tagging rock lobsters for their main export, the entire community operates on this massive cooperative spirit. It's a real team effort. And this brilliantly illustrates that mindset. Look at this direct quote from their 1817 founding document. "No member shall assume any superiority whatever. When survival is this precarious, ego just has to go right out the window. Everyone is equal, everyone pitches in." It's exactly why this community has remained so unbelievably tight-knit for over 2 centuries. But listen, even with absolutely perfect teamwork, they're still at the total mercy of nature. The islanders always have to have 2 schedules ready, a good weather plan and a bad weather plan. Because the island's massive volcanic peak creates its own entirely unpredictable squalls. A calm, sunny morning can turn into a dangerous swell in minutes, making their tiny harbor completely unusable. They literally have to shift gears instantly. Section 4. The choice of voluntary isolation. The uncontacted Sentinelese. So up until now, we've looked at communities isolated by geography. But for the Sentinelese people of the Andaman Islands, isolation is an active, defensive choice. The staggering range here, anywhere from 15 to 500 people, is their estimated population. Now, why such a massive gap in that estimate? Simply put, because their isolation is so profound and their rejection of the outside world is so complete that we really just don't know much about them. Any surveys basically have to be done from a distance. To understand why they so fiercely protect their borders, we really have to look at this history of contact. In 1867, shipwreck survivors clashed with the islanders. Then in 1880, a British colonial officer named Maurice Vidal Portman landed and actually kidnapped 6 Sentinelese. The adults sadly died of illness shortly after. Fast forward to 1981, another shipwreck resulted in a standoff, and while there was a brief period of peaceful contact in 1991, where anthropologists exchanged coconuts with them, subsequent unauthorized intrusions by fishermen in 2006, and an American missionary in 2018 ended fatally. So you can see, centuries of uninvited, often tragic intrusions have clearly shaped their response to outsiders. So, the crucial point is this. The Indian government, recognizing this history and the rights of the Sentinelese, maintains a strict, eyes-on, hands-off policy. They keep a 5-kilometer exclusion zone around the island, and this isn't just about preventing violence. It's genuinely about protecting the Sentinelese. As an uncontacted people, they lack immunity to common modern diseases. That means any contact could be totally catastrophic for their entire population. The policy simply respects their clear choice to be left alone. Section 5. The future of remote life. Balancing tradition and modernity. We've seen how geographic and voluntary isolation has protected these incredible cultures, but the modern world is closing in fast. Climate change is a massive, massive threat. In Greenland, melting sea ice restricts vital hunting grounds and literally brings displaced polar bears right into towns. Out in the oceans, changing weather patterns and rising seas threaten island infrastructure. And on top of all that, there are outside economic pressures and the very real struggle of retaining young people who might, seek opportunities in distant cities. These communities are facing incredibly difficult choices right now about how to balance the influx of technology and global realities while still holding on to their ancient, hard-won knowledge. So what does this all mean? In a world that feels smaller every single day, What do these isolated groups actually teach us? Honestly, I think they show us the absolute best of human determination. Whether they are enduring freezing Arctic winters, navigating tempestuous oceans, or defending their ancestral shores, they prove that human culture is incredibly, unbelievably flexible. Living on the edge is tough, for sure, but it produces some of the most resilient societies on Earth. So, what do you think is the real value of living on the edge today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep exploring.